Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Dr. Travis Brown, what is This Medical Life all about?
This is the pursuit of knowledge as we learn about diseases from the ancient times to the present day. These are the stories of medicine.
Dr. Travis Brown, do you know what I find really ironic but satisfying?
What's that?
This podcast we create for GPs, specialists, medical students, allied health practitioners, and the general public, but primarily for that first group because it's at the top end of getting into the detail, to keep fresh. And you were just confiding in me that even you've been learning along this journey as well, as we get ready just to tie a knot in the end of 2023. What did you mean by that?
The thing you realize when you're going through your exams and when you're studying medicine is you think, I'm going to know it all eventually. I'm going to be able to pass every exam that I need to come through. There might be a few bumps in the road, but I will know everything there is to know. And the first thing you realize is when you finish those exams is you don't really know much at all. And it's a bit of a unsettling feeling. I've heard some friends say, once you've finished your exams and you're practicing and there's no safety net, there's consultants beside you and there's people more experienced. But once you're by yourself and you're signing at the end of the report, whatever it is, and the safety net's removed, you feel like, okay, I'm about to get sued. Just when is it going to happen? Because I'm going to get something wrong.
Wow.
And the amazing thing is about 3 to 5 years you hit after your exams, you hit a sort of a peak of I'm experienced, I have the eye of practicality as well as sort of knowing my exams haven't been that far behind me. But unless you're working in your area, you realize you don't know much outside of that area at all. And generalists are probably the people who have a broad experience, but you start to feel, I don't know so much in this area and that area, and I still have to work in that area. Now, I'm a generalist. I actually span across a few of the pathology specialties. But if you were to ask me something about neurology, and I have studied that in the past, if you were to ask me something about cardiology, I would be reaching back into my medical school days or as a resident. And that knowledge is well and truly dated. And when we look at why we do this podcast, this is almost, it's an educational experience. We get to talk to the experts, and I'm actually asking questions that I want to know.
You just want to know, yes.
And so the whole point behind it is each time I do a topic, I get to ask, what do we need to know? And that's why at the end we say, look, what's the important points to take from this? And so this, yes, actually, I've been learning. The reason the podcast is structured how it is because when I was a student, when I was studying as a medical student, the people who interest me the most were the people who actually said, hey, here's a bit of a story. Now, my bent is stories. I love them. Always captures my attention. And then they would actually tell me some information about it and say, here's what you need to know. So that is pretty much the structure of each episode.
Well, it's interesting because I have done some research. I've got 10 of the hardest neurological questions. And from what you just said, it'll be a complete waste of time to run through them. So, no, we won't.
And that's the thing. The amazing thing that I've come across multiple times, and you'll hear guests talk about it, who are specialists, and they believe a general practitioner's and the generalist's job is the hardest. Because remember, you can know everything in your specialty, and it's actually your job as a specialist to know everything. But imagine your job is to know a bit about everything and trying to keep up to date. And again, that's the whole point behind the podcast is here's an update about this topic or this disease or this condition, and here's what you need to know from it.
Well, you see, that's how it's impacted you. The way it's impacted me, obviously I'm not a practicing medical person, my ears prick up when I listen to other podcasts. Then they verge into the realm of the medical territory. And I was quite arrested by some of the comments being made, and I think I'm going to get the gentleman's name really wrong in the pronunciation, but Anupam Bapujina. That's how I'm going to pronounce his name. He was interviewed on Econ Talk, which is one of my favourite other podcasts, and the topic is on random acts of medicine, and Travels will take note to put a link to this in the show notes for the episode. But he was talking and reflecting on the world of being a doctor, being in medicine, and how in his reading of the situation, there is a focus on the challenging ones, the ones that grab attention, the big ones, and sometimes we can miss the more conventional, less sexy, in inverted commas, diagnoses that might actually have been bang on target. He'll say it more eloquently. Let's have a little listen to how he said it.
There's this phrase, common things being common, right? There's a lot of medical ailments that are very common and that are very commonly misdiagnosed because they're common, but also because they sort of present in ways that is not obvious to the diagnostician. You could imagine a situation where we train people, the majority of people, to be diagnostically excellent when it comes to common medical problems and focus their sort of mental bandwidth on being really good in those areas. And then there's other people who become really specialists who can help solve the zebras. So if we don't know what's going on here, we quickly allocate you to somebody who has diagnostic excellence in a more limited domain of diagnosis. And that's something, but what we do in medical school is not that. We go ad nauseum about the zebras. And so if you're in teaching in a medical rounds and you present something to a medical student, they're going to give you like all the zebras as well, but they might miss one of the common things that you never want to miss because we've trained them to learn about all the zebras.
So a common saying you'll hear in medicine is common things happen commonly. And it's such an odd statement, but alternative is...
Uncommon things?
That's right. So rare...
Happen rarely?
No. Oh, geez, I can't even get it. So someone send it in.
This is staying in.
No.
I'm just
trying to work out, what is it? It's...
What are you trying to say without...
Rare presentations of common things.
I would love you as my GP.
So rare... No, just trying to work out. Okay, I'm going to give you an antihypertensive and you can pay the bill out the front.
Okay.
Next time you come back in. No, look...
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we just reflect on, I think everyone got the gist of what you were trying to say. I hope you're just going to bulk bill for this particular session. Just to wrap up, because we've got the 15-minute piece that we're about to play, which is a summary of some of the highlights of the last year, which we put together for an awards process. And so it's a nice way to finish off the year. But just before that, what jumps into your memory as one of the most surprising episodes we did?
Look, here's the thing. I actually don't have a good answer for that. And the reason why I come down to it is I realized thinking about it, what stuck in my head, or what was my favorite episode? And it was, the best way to answer it is my favorite episode is the episode I'm working on at the time. Yeah. And this was, it's not a sort of a weasel way to get out of it, but it's actually saying, look, I'll immerse myself in a topic. I try and find interesting perspectives on the stories that come through. And I think that's probably the most enjoyable part of the podcast, is finding these little nuggets of stories that I just didn't know about before. And sometimes we even get people who are storytellers, who are authors or whatever, who have told a story to tell us about that information. And so that's the part. Is there one that is stuck in the mind for you?
Look, similar to you, we have the goldfish protocol. Whatever we're working on is the thing that grabs our attention at the time and is fascinating. But the vitamin D episode that we did with Professor Ken Sakaris, I think it was his third time on the podcast, and he's just so disarmingly illuminating in the way he talks about his topics, and he pushes back when I throw the kite out a little bit. He'll grab that string and he'll take it for a bit of a run. And I really like that little bit of play that he brings to the table.
Yeah.
Final comments before we play out with the summaries.
So again, this podcast is just a mixture of putting some topics out there and actually trying to present it in an educational and entertaining way. The first and foremost thing is I have to thank is the people who have participated, our guests who have come on, given their time freely, shared their expertise, shared their knowledge. We can't thank them enough. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is thanking the audience for their participation, feedback. We're now at the point where we're getting organisations and people saying, hey, have you thought about this topic, and putting their hand up and actually saying, let's discuss this. And I think it's really produced some podcasts that have been greatly appreciated. So for that, these are the people we say, look, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you to everyone who has participated. We really appreciate it. It's fantastic for everyone to be involved.
And I think it's worth remembering that rare presentations of common diseases is common.
Is more common than common presentations of rare. And the quote is, common... No, I haven't got it.
So it's rare presentations of common diseases is more common than common presentations of rare diseases. That wasn't that hard. As a journalist myself, I can see that Marshall McLuhan and his work, The Medium as the Message, really at work here. When you've got a paper that's being presented with all that pageantry, it has a certain place on a pedestal in the way it's being delivered that would keep some people from questioning too closely.
Well, yes, although for a long time the complaint was made that this was a media creation. This whole thing was a media creation, and journalists should have been more aware that a case series of 12 children doesn't get you very far down the road. But when you think about it, autism was first classically described on 11 children in the Baltimore area of the United States. AIDS itself, before it came to be known as AIDS, but the disease which came to be known as AIDS was first characterized on the basis of 5 gay men in Los Angeles. Now, the idea that one would just dismiss this case series wasn't really in keeping even with the 1990s, because it may be that these doctors at this hospital had just got lucky and had stumbled on the first cases of what might be a hidden epidemic of catastrophic injuries that weren't being noticed, weren't being picked up on in other hospitals. All of these 12 children came to a pediatric bowel clinic at the Royal Free. So immediately you're thinking, well, this in itself might just be a freak occurrence. And that's how it looked. It looked as though they'd just turned up randomly. And basically, if you were clinicians working in that environment, if it was the case that you were running bowel clinics for children, and over a period of, I think it was about 9 months, a series of parents turned up with their children and made a strikingly similar complaint. My child was developing perfectly normally. He or she, in fact, 11 of them were boys, 1 was a girl. He or she received the measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine, and within days, they were showing the first symptoms of autism. Now, that was the position that was represented in this paper. And if that was right, that needed explaining. And yes, okay, it's hard to expect newspapers and television stations who, at least in the UK, if not always in the US, can't afford to employ doctors to be their medical correspondents because doctors want more money than we get eventually.
Yes. I did look at Travis as you said that.
Yeah. So the idea that it was all the media was the medical establishment's response. They just said, oh, well, it was only 12 children. This is all the media. It's all a lot of hoo-ha about nothing. Listen to us. We say the MMR vaccine is safe. There is no worries. It's been given to however many 100 million children or whatever. Take no notice of this. So they appealed to their own authority. That's where the situation rather failed, because perhaps the most remarkable well, at least to me, it sounds weird saying I'm at the centre of the most remarkable aspect of something, but nevertheless, I'm going to, because it is pretty extraordinary that it was a journalist and a newspaper, the Sunday Times in London, which exposed this paper for what it really was. I was able to go round the back of that paper, if you like, find out who the children were, find out what was wrong with them, find out what wasn't wrong with them, and show that that paper was, in the judgment of the editors of the British Medical Journal some years later, an elaborate fraud. And this paper was indeed an elaborate fraud. It was a concoction at every level and in every way.
Well, we didn't decide to make a vaccine. We decided that we wanted to study the virus. I mean, I was interested in the immunology of the virus, and Dan was interested in how the virus caused cancer. And the problem was that, unlike 99.9% of viruses, you can't grow papillomavirus in the lab. It just refuses to grow. Most viruses, you put them in with the right cell type, and one virus goes in and a million come out. The cell dies in the process, and you get the spread of the virus into the cells that you're infecting. Papillomavirus doesn't do that, and it doesn't do it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's very fussy about which sorts of cells it's prepared to infect. It will only infect epithelial cells while they're dividing, and that means basically the basal layers of skin. And the second thing is that it doesn't really mature as a virus unless the basal cells also mature along with it, so that the cells have to become more skin-like in order to allow the virus to assemble and come out of the cell. And then the third problem is it doesn't kill the cell. It has to wait until the cells fall off before it can pass on to somebody else. So for all of these reasons, we wanted to try and imitate the virus in the lab. In other words, make enough of it we could understand it.
Going back to just first principles, what is the actual pathogenesis of this disease?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So to really understand the pathogenesis of Barrett's esophagus, to understand, why, what metaplasia is. And what happens essentially is that we know that if you have reflux, reflux is acid going into the esophagus and even a little bit higher, that really the cells there don't like it, because you've got to think about what sort of cells line what parts of our body and why we have those cells lining it. So in the esophagus, we have squamous epithelium, which is the same sort of epithelium which is on our skin. We just don't have all the keratiny flakes. So it's a robust, it's like a brick wall. So it's great for when we swallow food and things bump all the way down, from our mouth and bump all the way down and drop into our stomach. That's great. And then the stomach, we have we have glandular epithelium, which is made up of, like a little, inverted, usually single layers of cells, and they produce acid and mucin and all sorts of wonderful things to digest and protect and all that sort of stuff. So when we get reflux from that acid in the stomach, it goes up and splashes on the squamous epithelium. And why squamous epithelium is really good at resisting stuff. It's not very good at resisting acid. Same way as if we put acid on our skin, it burns. It happens there. So the body that area gets inflamed. And as a result, the body tries to deal with that in the best way it possibly can. And what it does is it tries to change to a cell type that is better suited to deal with acid, and that is the intestines, because the intestines has to deal with acid. If our small bowel has, mucin and stuff to protect from the acid coming from the stomach, and so the stomach itself does that. So it changes, and it depends on how far we want to go into this, because there's a lot of things saying, there's reprogramming of stem cells and blah, 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 blah. But in essence, what they actually think may happen is either that, yes, some of the stem cells, so the cells that that line, that epithelium, that when things get damaged, they might actually, when they get damaged and they regrow along, when they've had a bit of ulceration, they might actually regrow not into squamous epithelium in the esophagus, but into that glandular epithelium to try and protect the body from further acid damage. So that is the pathogenesis of Barrett's esophagus.
Coming back to that, stress is stress. When you look at the statistics on mental health, particularly among the medical profession, it's pretty damning. And then when you start to go down into the subcategories of who's being most affected, general practitioners are right at the pointy end of the statistics on poor mental and physical health. And so it is a overrepresented professional sort of role that is a high stress role. And I think COVID has tightened the screws on that considerably. So from a GP perspective, we've found that this has been a useful tool to engage. And the other thing, interestingly, and this is reflected in the literature as well, GPs know all this stuff. They know this stuff, and they're there in consults telling it to their patients. You need to be doing this, and you should be doing this, and you should be getting a bit of exercise, and you should be eating a bit better, and look after your sleep, and are you catching up with your mates, and all this good stuff. But as a group, we're not doing it ourselves. And so it's a good reminder. And the always a little further piece is just talks to the fact that this isn't about heroic interventions. This isn't about, okay, fad diets, crash diets, I'm going to fast for 3 weeks or go on a 10-day silence retreat or run a marathon in 6 weeks. And once again, we wouldn't encourage our patients to do that. And so we need to turn that lens back on ourselves and just do small, regular, sustainable, habitual positive interventions across the layers of this resilient shield model to slowly, always a little further, build and maintain a robust resilience.
We're in 1964 and it's Friday. Mm-hmm. Catherine Kitty Genovese is walking home. She's 28 years old. She's the manager of a Halls Bar in New York, and she's returning home from work. Now it's 3 a.m. and she's lives in Queens, New York. She's parked her car. She's ended up getting out of the adjacent car park where she lives. It's Kew Gardens, Long Island, near a railway station. And she turns off light, gets out, locks her car. Mm-hmm. She's about 100 feet away from the entrance to her building, which is in the back of the building, as at the front has retail stores. Yep. The time she's walking along is around 3:15 a.m. And she notices a man in the darkness at the back of the lot. And she gets a bit nervous about this. She's not quite sure. And she quickens her pace. The man follows. She looks around, but by the time she hits a bookstore, the man grabs her and Kitty screams. The time is 3:20 and the man pulls a knife.
Oh my God, he stabbed me! Please help me, please help me!
Scattered lights in the adjacent 10-story building go on. And someone, a man from the building, yells, "Let that girl alone!" Now the man walks away and Kitty struggles to her feet. The lights in the building begin to turn off. A few minutes later, the man returns and he's going after Kitty. He pulls the knife again and stabs her a second time.
I'm dying! I'm dying! I'm dying!
Lights go on in the building again, but no one helps. No one does anything. The man gets in his car and drives away. Now Kitty is left struggling. She crawls to the back of the building to enter her apartment. She manages to get into the stairwell, but she's struggling and there's lots of blood. The man returns a third time and he's searching. He finds the building, he pulls at a door but it's locked. Then he pulls at a second door and it opens to the stairwell. Kitty is struggling at the foot of the stairs. The man approaches and stabs her a third time and he leaves. The first phone call to police is at 3:50 a.m. This is 30 minutes after the first attack. Police arrive within 2 minutes, but nothing could be done and Kitty dies. Now this story caught the attention of the press and it's a shocking story And they reported at the time the number of witnesses was 38.
Wow. This Medical Life is recorded in the Talked About Marketing Studios in Adelaide. For show notes and more information about the podcast, visit thismedicallife.com.au. You can contact the hosts via Twitter. Dr. Travis Brown is at Dr. Travis Brown. That's DR for doctor. And Steve Davis is at Steve Davis. Editing and production is by Tim Whiffen. Design is by Tom Buzenjut. This has been a Pathnotes Proprietary Limited production.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.